Welcome to Consider Eternity. Today we're going to look at the life of Moses and how he was chosen and called by God to do great things. We will study how God worked in his life and prepared him, and how Moses responded. Then we will consider how each one of us has our own unique calling given to us by God, and how we can learn from the life of Moses to better walk in that calling. And learn to walk with God in a way where he will direct and empower us to move forward in all the great plans that he has prepared in advance for us to do. Now, Moses is one of the most significant figures in the Old Testament. He was chosen by God to deliver the Israelites from slavery in Egypt and lead them to the edge of the Promised Land. His life was marked by powerful acts of God and is an example for us of God's sovereign power working through a person who walks with God. Moses was chosen by God, molded by his plans for him, and responded in humility and obedience to God's instruction. Through this, Moses learned to walk with God and continued in close relationship with him. As a result of this process, Moses was in a position to be powerfully used by God according to the plans and purposes God had for Moses and for the nation of Israel.
The supernatural story of Moses' life, the amazing wonders throughout, and the call to leadership highlights God's sovereignty, with Moses acting as his obedient and humble prophet. God worked through Moses to rescue the Israelites from oppression and bring judgment through 10 plagues upon Egypt, each one showing God's supremacy over all creation. Water to blood. Moses, at God's command, struck the Nile, turning its waters into blood, killing fish and making the water undrinkable. This demonstrated God's power over their vital life source, the Nile River. Frogs. An overwhelming plague of frogs infested the land, showing God's control over animal life. Lice and gnats. Dust turned into gnats or lice, a miracle the Egyptian magicians could not replicate, acknowledging it as the finger of God. Flies. Swarms of flies plagued the Egyptians, but remarkably, the land of Goshen where the Israelites lived was spared, emphasizing God's ability to distinguish between his people and their oppressors. Pestilence on livestock. A deadly disease struck Egyptian livestock, while Israelite animals remained unharmed, highlighting God's selective judgment. Boils. Painful boils afflicted Egyptians and their animals. Hail and fire. A devastating hailstorm mingled with fire rained down, destroying crops and killing people and animals. But again, Goshen was untouched. Locusts. A massive swarm of locusts devoured everything the hail had left. Darkness. 3 days of thick darkness enveloped Egypt, demonstrating God's power over the sun and a primary Egyptian god, Ra. Death of the firstborn. The final and most devastating plague saw the death of every firstborn in Egypt, from Pharaoh's son to the firstborn of the livestock. The Israelites were spared only by applying the blood of a lamb to their doorposts, an event which became the Passover. Throughout these plagues, God explicitly stated his purpose, that you may know that I am the Lord. These judgments on Egypt displayed God's power and glory through a prolonged display of supernatural power over the natural realm. The parting of the Red Sea. After the final plague, Pharaoh finally let the Israelites go, but then later changed his mind and chased after them all the way to the Red Sea. Cornered, the Israelites faced certain destruction. The Israelites, being totally helpless against the powerful Egyptian army, are saved. At God's command, Moses stretched out his staff, and God parted the Red Sea, creating a dry path for the Israelites to cross. When the Egyptians pursued, God caused the waters to return, drowning the Pharaoh's entire army. This miracle both demonstrates God's sovereignty over nature and his complete control over the fate of nations. Provision in the wilderness. For 40 years, as the Israelites wandered in the wilderness, God continued to demonstrate his sovereign provision through Moses. Manna and quail. God miraculously provided daily bread, manna, and periodically sent quail to feed the vast multitude, teaching them dependence on him. Water from the rock. Twice when the people grumbled about thirst, God commanded Moses to strike a rock, and water gushed forth, satisfying their needs. Even in Moses' disobedience in the second instance, striking the rock when told to speak to it, God's provision remained. The law at Sinai. At Mount Sinai, God established a covenant with Israel through Moses. He descended upon the mountain in a cloud, thunder, and lightning, revealing his glory and giving Moses the 10 Commandments, inscribed on stone tablets by his own finger. This act solidified God's sovereignty as the lawgiver and established the foundation of Israel's relationship with him. Moses, following his calling and purpose, was a leader and a prophet, communicating God's will to the people. You have a calling from God. Are you trying to do it in your own strength or in His power? God's ways are often a mystery to us, especially when it comes to our purpose and how He prepares us to step into our calling. The life of Moses is a powerful story and example of how God molds and shapes us into vessels He can use, direct, and act through in power. It's a journey of divine calling, personal humbling, and ultimately, God's miraculous power working in and through Moses to accomplish His purposes. God's sovereign hand in raising up a leader. From the very beginning, God's plan for Israel's deliverance was set in motion. He ordained for His people to be in Egypt for 400 years, and after that time was fulfilled, they would be delivered. Genesis 15:13. God said to Abram, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years." After the 400 years were over, at the appointed time, God raised up Moses to be their leader, prophet, and deliverer. Exodus 2:1-10. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." Even before his birth, a calling was placed on Moses' life. We see this through his miraculous preservation as a baby from a decree that Pharaoh gave to kill all the newborn males of the Hebrews. God sovereignly placed him exactly where he needed him to be in his early life, being raised in the Egyptian palace. This unique upbringing wasn't accidental. God was preparing Moses for his future role. His education in the royal courts would prepare him to write the first 5 books of the Bible, also known as the Pentateuch. This shows God's intricate preparation, equipping his chosen leaders long before they step into their roles. Now, after his time being spent, raised in the Egyptian palace, God's next step for Moses was preparation of a different kind, as God continued to mold Moses into the leader he would use to lead a nation of people chosen by God. The humbling process, from self-reliance to divine dependence. Like many who feel a divine stirring, Moses initially tried to fulfill his calling in his own strength. Witnessing the oppression of his people, he took matters into his own hands. Exodus 2:11-12 and 15. One day, after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian. This act, full of zeal and self-reliance, failed miserably. Instead of rising as a leader, he was greatly humbled, forced into exile, and became an outcast from his own people. This life-changing moment in Moses' life highlights an important truth. God often allows us to exhaust our own efforts so we can learn to depend solely on Him. For 40 long years, Moses was cast into the wilderness. During this period, he was stripped of all his worldly expectations, his pride, and any lingering self-sufficiency. He went from being a prince of Egypt to a humble shepherd, not even caring for his own sheep, but caring for his father-in-law Jethro's sheep. By the end of this wilderness experience, Moses had nothing left to boast about. His humility was so profound that it was written of Moses that he was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. Following a miraculous and powerful experience of God appearing to him in a burning bush, where God gives Moses his divine instructions and calling, Moses' reaction reveals his humble state. No longer trusting in his own abilities, Moses doubts his own capacity to even speak properly. We continue to see the humility of Moses in that even after his divine revelation, he still sought permission from Jethro to leave. This deep humility was a perfect positioning for God to work powerfully through him. God's timing. Sometimes, even when God calls us to something, circumstances don't align with our expectations or timelines. Moses experienced this when he first went to Egypt and proclaimed God's message of deliverance to the elders. Exodus 4:29-31. Moses and Aaron brought together all the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. He also performed the signs before the people, and they believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. When Moses first proclaimed to the elders of Israel that God had said he was about to bring them out of their misery in Egypt and into a new promised land full of blessing, the elders responded in belief, wonder, and worship. But as things progressed, instead of an immediate rescue, things took a turn for the worse. Pharaoh increased the workload and oppression for the Hebrews, leading the people to grumble against Moses. Exodus 5:21. And they said, "May the Lord look on you and judge you. You have made us obnoxious to Pharaoh and his officials, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us." Moses was caught in a difficult in-between time, facing the people's doubts while God's spectacular deliverance had not yet begun. In his discouragement, Moses brought the people's complaints and his own doubts directly to God. Exodus 5:22-23. Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Why, Lord, have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on all this people, and you have not rescued your people at all." God in his faithfulness answered and encouraged him, reaffirming his promises. Exodus 6:1-8. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand he will drive them out of his country." God also said to Moses, "I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name the Lord I did not make myself fully known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, where they resided as foreigners. Moreover, I heard the groaning of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord." Fortified by this divine reassurance, Moses continued to follow God's instructions, patiently waiting for his perfect timing. This reminds us that even when our calling seems to hit a roadblock and things get worse before they get better, God is still at work. Our role is to bring our doubts and the concerns of those we lead before Him, trusting His timing and continue in obedience. God's power through a humble vessel. When God raised Moses up as leader over the Israelites, it was undeniably God who performed all the powerful acts. Moses simply obeyed what God told him. The plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, the provision of the manna, all were God's doing, channeled through the obedience of Moses. Even the very words Moses wrote in the Pentateuch were God's words spoken through him. 2 Peter 1:21. For prophecy never had its origin in the human will, but prophets, though human, spoke from God as they were carried along by the Holy Spirit. Moses was transformed into a vessel that allowed God to work without Moses' ego or will getting in the way. This humility was again evident, even when his authority was challenged by those closest to him, like Miriam and Aaron, his brother and sister, and later by Korah and his followers. Numbers 12, 1-13. Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? They asked. Hasn't he also spoken through us? And the Lord heard this. Now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. At once the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, "Come out to the tent of meeting, all three of you." So the three of them went out. Then the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud. He stood at the entrance to the tent and summoned Aaron and Miriam. When the two of them stepped forward, he said, "Listen to my words. When there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" The anger of the Lord burned against them, and he left them. When the cloud lifted from above the tent, Miriam's skin was leprous. It became as white as snow. Aaron turned towards her and saw that she had a defiling skin disease. And he said to Moses, "Please, my lord, I ask you not to hold against us the sin we have so foolishly committed. Do not let her be like a stillborn infant coming from its mother's womb with its flesh half eaten away." So Moses cried out to the Lord, "Please, God, heal her." And when Korah and 250 of his followers rose up against Moses' leadership and said, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then did you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" Moses' reaction is recorded in Numbers 16, 4-11. When Moses heard this, he fell face down. Then he said to Korah and all his followers, "In the morning the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy, and he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses he will cause to come near him. You, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. Take censers, and tomorrow put burning coals and incense in them before the Lord. The man the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far." So the next day, Korah and his followers did as Moses requested, thinking that the Lord would choose them over Moses. Once they were assembled, the Lord spoke to Moses, "Separate yourselves from this assembly so I can put an end to them at once." Numbers 16, 28-33. Then Moses said, "This is how you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all these things and that it was not my idea. If these men die a natural death and suffer the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about something totally new, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them with everything that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the realm of the dead, then you will know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt." As soon as he finished saying all this, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them and their households, and all those associated with Korah, together with their possessions. They went down alive into the realm of the dead, with everything they owned. The earth closed over them, and they perished, and were gone from the community. Moses did not defend himself in his own power. He understood that his authority and power came from God alone. Instead of engaging in a personal battle, he brought the challenges directly before God knowing that God would defend the calling and leadership he had placed on him. This teaches us that when people question or challenge the authority God has given us, we don't need to try to defend it through our own strength. Instead, we go to God and he will justify and defend what he has entrusted to us.
The journey of Moses is a prime example of God's process in raising up a person into their calling. It's a process that often involves humbling, removing self-reliance, and teaching us to depend on him alone. In that place of humility, God can work powerfully through us, accomplishing the plans that he has prepared in advance for us, and even defending the calling that he has placed upon our lives.
Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. 1 Peter 5:5-6. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time.